In late February of 2022, Russia officially began what it has since called its special military operation in Ukraine. While this event marked a significant escalation in violence between the two countries, it was not where the conflict began. Nearly a decade ago, the United States and European imperialist powers backed a far-right coup in Ukraine that overthrew the elected government and installed a puppet regime on the border of the US's Cold War rival. At the time, this was seen as a clear provocation by the United States, and an attempt to gain a foothold to launch an eventual proxy war in the region, a reality which has been conveniently swept under the rug in recent years. But even this thinly veiled threat cannot be considered the true beginning of the conflict. We'd have to go all the way back to the illegal dissolution of the Soviet Union to really understand the root of the problem. The undermining and eventual destruction of the original socialist project, the brutal and sadistic economic shock therapy that followed, and the fragmenting of what had once been a strong and united people. The moment the Second World War ended, the United States began preparing for conflict with this burgeoning new economic power. The Soviet Union was rightly seen as a shining alternative to capitalism, and was a ray of hope for millions of average people around the world. And so the United States began its long process of trying to kill this hope, drafting war plans, and even considering a preemptive nuclear strike. This is the context in which we must analyze the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What tends to get lost in mainstream coverage of this war, or any conflict that benefits the imperialist powers, is the human cost of war. Those who sign the papers and make the decrees that send entire generations into the meat grinder will never hold a gun themselves. They'll never lose a child to geopolitical jockeying. Their lifestyle won't be affected. They won't lose their homes to shelling. Their pantries will remain stocked, and their water will always be clean. But that is not the reality for the people being sent to fight, and the loved ones they're desperately trying to protect from pointless escalation and random acts of cruelty inspired by the hate and bitterness of war. As with any active conflict, exact numbers are closely guarded by the combatants, but there's no hiding all the footage that makes its way to Telegram, Twitter, and other more democratized online news sources. Conservatively, tens of thousands of people have been killed since last year, including civilians, as well as mercenaries flying in from Western countries to hunt their fellow human beings for sport. We've seen horrific footage of homes destroyed, bodies burned beyond recognition, and what looks like evidence of chemical weapons. War is a dirty, bloody business, and it only benefits the ruling class of the involved nations. The conscripts shipped off to fight in some leveled city have no chance of elevated status. Their lives won't be improved by butchering their fellow workers. They will be lucky to return home at all, and most of them with scars both physical and mental that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, those at the top talk of democracy, freedom, national determination, and invoke some mythologized past to fool the peasants into thinking they're dying for a noble cause. They are not. There must be a peaceful resolution to this conflict. We have seen in recent months that the United States remains the primary obstacle to peace in the region. As China attempts to broker a peaceful resolution, the US and its lackeys call ever more loudly for increased weapons shipments and greater Western involvement. Thankfully, this conflict has coincided with the sharpening of contradictions surrounding the US. The once untouchable global hegemon is losing its grip on the rest of the world. Countless Latin American and African countries have broken ties with the US and accepted more mutually beneficial trade agreements with China. Even those countries which the US expects to be loyal, like France, are expressing doubts that the United States is a reliable partner, and are beginning to shift towards the East. What we see as a result is a desperate attempt by the US and its staunchest allies to weaken its economic adversaries by encouraging proxy wars in Eastern Europe and Asia. So far, China has not taken the bait, and instead has stepped into its role as a key negotiator, recently securing peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia, contributing greatly to ending the war in Yemen, and now, with any luck, helping to peacefully resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It has become increasingly apparent that as the US empire declines, it will become ever more violent and militaristic, a dangerous situation for the rest of the world, as the United States remains the only country on Earth to have used nuclear weapons on human beings. And they did it not once, but twice. The Communist Party of the United States, and the masses of people both here and around the world, must call unanimously for an end to US involvement not just in Ukraine, but in the South China Sea, in Africa, in Latin America, and everywhere the US war machine has extended its tendrils. We must unequivocally say no to US involvement and no to imperialist war, always. Enough blood has been spilled desperately trying to maintain an economic order that does not serve the people. Capitalism and imperialism remain the greatest evils of our time. And if we are to secure a better future for all of us, it must be dismantled. And we can start by demanding a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Ukraine.